had to take the child, go down move from one place, go into Egypt, and wait until the angel was sent back to tell him, it's time to go back to Nazareth now. And being warned and bring the word for Herod, seek a young child to kill him. Now I need you to remember today, we're talking about the young child in the days of Moses, and when Christ was born, the same thing. You'll understand why as I go along. Brother Lee, 2 years old. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were born in Bethlehem. And it wasn't just in Bethlehem. To show you how upset he was, Sister Sonia. The prophecy he heard was the child was born in Bethlehem. So there's no need to go over the border. But he's so upset, Sister Shirley, that he's gone into all the coasts thereof. And any child from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men, that was fulfilled. That was fulfilled, which was spoken by Jeremy. Who's Jeremy?
Jeremiah.
So Jeremiah, what is your name? Jeremy. Jeremiah, the prophet said, in Ramah there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted. Why? Because they were not. They didn't get a chance to live over 2 years old. And let me introduce the word now, which I want you to understand today. Culling. Culling took place in the Old Testament book of Egypt to prevent the population of Israel to grow. But whom God bless,
no man
curse. And culling then took place again, Deacon Wallace, in the New Testament. So I can preach culling from the Old Testament and culling. Men under the influence, culling, Brother Victor, of the adversary, will kill children out of fear of one, Israel coming to take over them, which they were never going to do, because Israel was prophesied to leave Egypt, so there was no need to be killing them. Secondly, Herod feared that this king that was to be born, a little child, don't just born, and you want to kill him because you fear your position. Men's fear of their position and their wealth will affect the poor. The rich man will rob the poor when the truth is the poor should rob from him. If the poor rob the rich, he's not going to miss it. But why would the rich want to rob the poor when he had more than what he can ever spend in his lifetime? It is utter folly. Culling. And I want to say this. Back in Egypt, it was the young men. Now Herod got so mad that it wasn't about the young men under 2 months. It was now about children. It says children. It doesn't state girl or boy. Kill them all. So culling took place. And let me say this. We're living in a society where Herod, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the center of the world at the time, and Herod under the Roman Empire, have it in their heart to commit legalized murder to protect their wealth and honor. And brethren, let me tell you what's in my heart to tell you today. You have to be careful of men today, and midwives today, and societies today, and kings today, because if you're not on their wish to do lists, your life means nothing to them. And they will waste your life. Come in, mommy. Come in here. This is for you as well. Come and have a seat. Because when you go to the hospital, they might look at you and say, your time is up.
It's true. Ask them about this.
Come in, mommy. You need to hear this. God bless you for coming. And may God strengthen you. We've got to be careful how we go to the National Health Service these days. You will find when you have an ailment and you call them, they don't even want to answer the phone. You will find when you go and sit in the reception and make an appointment, they want you to come back. However, when they send you a letter wanting you to come for what they want, because that letter will bring money for them. Because for every letter they send out that you react to, they get money from the government. Money to the National Health Service, and I'm not saying in all cases, but in those who sit in the seat of authority, is more important than your life. And I'm going to prove it to you today by the words of a certain man himself. Let me say this, and we're going to finish today. And I'm glad you're here, Mom. Please stay around. We want to pray with you. We want to pray with you before you go. Whatever reason why God allows you to drift in here today, we want to pray with you. In the house of God, it's not about making money and wealth. Jesus said this, my house shall be called a what? House of prayer. So before you go for your next operation, come let us pray for you. There was a woman in the Bible who spent all her money on doctors and she grew the worse. But she got up one morning and heard that Jesus was passing by. And she said, I don't even want to talk to him. But if I could just touch the hem
of his garment.
She knew that she would be made whole. What a thing when you have faith in God so much that you're unclean and you don't want nobody to know. But I don't care. I'm going to touch him. Somebody said, touching Jesus is all that really matters. And your life will never be the same. So leave scroll up, please. I need to get another 15 minutes on this. Exodus 22, verse 23. And it came to pass that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed because of the bondage. Remember their sigh. And they cried, came up unto God by reason of the bondage. Being poor is your bondage. Because the rich will get, according to the scripture, what will they get? What will the rich do? Anyone read the Bible? The rich will get richer. And the poor will get poorer. Give God thanks for your over 60s Oyster card. Use it while you can, because one of these days they really start charging you for it. Wait till they start taking it back. Because when they realize they stop you by making all these rules on the regulations for you to drive in London, and when they realize now you're not driving, and then they give you all these free pass, they say our revenue is going down. So they need to make it back somehow. Do you see what happened after COVID? When they need to make all that money that they so-called spend, they need to make it back. They cried and sighed by reason of the bondage. Listen, brethren. When you're crying because of bondage, and when you cry because of the things that you're facing, and God heard. Now, the God we speak about is not an image, a statue. He's the living God. And God heard their groanings. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. And if you're groaning for any reason today, let me tell you, in the message that you hear today, God has heard your groaning. And God remembered the covenant which he made with Isaac and Jacob. And not only does God heard, Sister Deb, but listen to the next verse. And God looked. So God can hear and God can see. An angel said to God, my dear brother, thou God seest me, because she was a bondwoman. And when Sarah ran her house, she ran and sat one piece of crying, and God said, go back. When she said, thou God seest me, remember that God sees you everywhere you go. And she looked upon, and God looked upon the children of Israel And listen to this. And God had respect unto them. How many of you here today can understand that God had respect unto you? Let me tell you something. If you go down the road, there's a church that's been converted into a pub.
Yes, Millennium Carter.
And the people sitting in various class, drinking coffee, reading newspaper. They don't have no time for God. But God's eyes that can see, God to and fro, and He looks and He hears, and He sees that you would rather sit in the house of God than sit in the steakhouse that was the church. Let me tell you today, Mom, you walk in here, it's not just so. God have respect unto you because you could have walked by the house of God like everybody else. But David said this, one thing
Have I desired.
have I desired. And not only desire, but one thing will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's why I want to pray for you before you go. I don't want you to leave until I pray for you. So go down for me, David.
Thank you, Jesus.
Right. I need now to show you a clip from David Attenborough talking about overpopulation. The same thing that Pharaoh was concerned about. And the same thing that Herod was concerned about. So Lee, if you can, if not, I'll come down and let's again. Right. Minimize that. Excuse me. Let me know.
Years ago, when the WWF was founded, there were about 1 billion people on Earth. Now there are almost 7 billion, over twice as many, and every one of them needing space. Space for their homes, space to grow their food, or get others to grow it for them, space to build schools and roads and airfields. Where did that come from? A little might be taken from land occupied by other people, but most of it could only come from the land which, for millions of years, animals and plants have had for themselves, the natural world. But the impact of these extra millions of people has spread far beyond the space that they physically claim. The spread of industrialization has changed the chemical consistency of the atmosphere. The oceans that cover most of the surface of the planet have been polluted and increasingly acidified. And the Earth is warming. We now realize that the disasters that continue increasingly to afflict the natural world have one element that connects them all: the unprecedented increase in the number of human beings on the planet. There have been prophets who warned us of this impending disaster, of course. One of the first was Thomas Malthus. His most important book, an essay of the principle of population, was published over 200 years ago in 1798. Fundamental truth that Malthus proclaimed remains the truth. There cannot be more people on this earth that can be fed. They would like to believe in that oxymoron, sustainable growth. Kenneth Bowling, President Kennedy's environmental advisor 45 years ago, said something about this. Anyone who believes in indefinite growth in anything physical on a physically finite planet, he said, is either mad or an economist. The population of the world is now growing by nearly 80 million a year, 1.5 million a week. projected to grow by 10 million in the next 22 years. All these people in this country and worldwide, rich or poor, need and deserve food, water, energy and space. Will they be able to get it? I don't know. I hope so. You may have seen the government's foresight report on the future of food and farming. It shows how hard it is to feed the 7 billion of us who are alive today. It lists the many obstacles that are already making this harder to achieve. Soil erosion, salinization, the depletion of aquifers, overgrazing, the speed of plant diseases as a result of globalization, the absurd growing of food crops to turn into biofuels, to feed motor cars instead of people, and so on. So it underlines how desperately difficult it's going to be to feed a population that is projected to stabilize in the range of 8 to 10 billion people by the year 2050. I suspect that you could read a score of reports by bodies concerned with global problems and see that population is clearly one of the drivers that underlies them all, and yet find no reference to this obvious fact in any of them. Climate change tops the environmental agenda at present. We all know that every additional person will need to use some carbon energy, if only for farming, of course, and will therefore create more carbon dioxide. Though, of course, a rich person will produce vastly more than a poor one. Similarly, we can all see that every extra person is or will an extra victim of climate change, though the poor will undoubtedly suffer more than the rich. Why this strange silence? I mean, no one who privately disagrees that population growth is a problem. No one, except flat earthers, can deny that that planet is finite. We can all see it in that beautiful picture from of our Earth taken from the Apollo mission. It remains an obvious and brutal fact that on a finite planet, human populations will quite definitely stop at some point. And that can only happen in one of 2 ways. It can happen sooner, by fewer human births, in a word, by contraception. That's the humane way, the powerful option which allows all of us to deal with the problem if we collectively choose to do so. The alternative is an increased death rate, the way in which all other creatures must suffer through famine or disease or predation. That, translated into human terms, means famine or disease or war over oil or water or food or minerals or grazing rights or just living space. There is, alas, no third alternative of indefinite growth. The sooner we stabilize our numbers, the sooner we stop running up the down escalator. Stop population increase, stop the escalator, and we have some chance of reaching the top, that's to say, a decent life for all. To do that requires several things. First and foremost, it needs a much wider understanding of the problem, and that will not happen while the absurd taboo on discussing it remains such a powerful grip on the minds of so many otherwise worthy and intelligent people. Then it needs a change in our culture, so that while everyone retains the right to have as many children as they like, they understand that having large families means compounding the problems their children and everybody else's children will face in the future. It needs action by governments. In my view, all countries should develop a population policy. Some 70 countries already have them in one form or another, and give it priority. So now, our destiny is in our hands. There is one glimmer of hope. Wherever women have the vote, wherever they are literate, and have the medical facilities to control the number of children they bear, the birth rate falls. But what can each of us do? You or I? Well, there's just one thing I would ask. private and in public, as best you can, and as you judge right. Until it's broken here, there is no hope of the action we need. Wherever and whenever we speak of the environment, add a few words to ensure that the population element is not ignored. Every one of these global problems, social as well as environmental, becomes more difficult and ultimately impossible to solve with ever more people.
You love David Attenborough, don't you?
Look at your hand.
But forgive me for saying, but I make no apologies. He speaks like Pharaoh. And he speaks like Herod. Let me tell you what he's left out. God put seed, yielding seed of this kind in every plant. You can scroll down to the last one, really. And the world, to this day, has never run out of food. The fact is this: there is still land in England that's not been used. There isn't a planet or land on the earth where there isn't land that can be used. Everywhere, even in the little island of Jamaica, where I was born. If I took you there, come with me one day, I'll drive around and show you. This little island has so much land. So why is he speaking that the earth cannot sustain itself? Brethren, let me add God into the creation that he left out. The earth will sustain itself in the hand of God. God is such a wise God, you'll agree with me, that before he made man, he made provision. If he hadn't made provision, Brother Victor, they wouldn't be able to catch the amount of fish. And the amount of fish that they catch, they still haven't exhausted. Let me tell you about animals. Animals eat animals and feed on each other. And up to now, they haven't exhausted it. When you look at the mackerel, hey, if they left the salmon and everything alone, God has installed it in nature to reproduce itself. But when man take God out of the equation, it won't work. Because their maths is not like God's maths. Because as the heaven is higher than earth, so is God's ways above man's ways. Let me tell you something. God is not unwise to create the planet Earth and don't make sure that there is sufficiency in the earth to sustain every man. Because God calls the rain to do what?
Rain on the just and the unjust.
There is so much food piling up in Europe that rats are eating it.
Yes, food mountain.
There is no need for no nation in any country to be starving if brotherly love
Continue.
would continue. So why would this important man, whom we sit down and listen to above the preachers in the church, we spend 3 hours listening to him and he don't have no mention about God? You mean to say that the earth can't sustain itself? And trust me, he reads the Bible. Because some of the things that the BBC go study and search out, they get the information from the Bible. But when a man chooses not to give credit to God, he will speak to the opposition. Let me tell you something. Brethren, man will live 80 years and 10. You cannot preach evolution as a cycle. And what's the word they use when they have the animals going around and what do they call it? Where there's an ecology where this one eats this one and it turns around like a, what do they call it?
Food chain or...
The food chain. So there's got to be a food chain. So who don't like spiders? But who knows the job of the spider?
Kill the fly.
Who you don't like. And I'm glad you killed the fly. Because where does the fly go and pitch? Don't tell me.
On your
And they
food.
come and sit on your food. So what the spiders does, they spin their webs and catch the fly. Even the very fox has its purpose. To everything,
There's a purpose.
there's a purpose under the heaven. But when we choose not to acknowledge God, do you think God will sit on his throne and let the earth that he had made and give a commandment to bring forth seed-yielding seeds after it's done? Why can you eat an apple and throw it after it if there wasn't enough? The earth belongs to who?
The Lord.
The Lord.
And who does a cat on 1,000 hills?
Belong to the Lord.
And you're
Belongs
trying
to
to
the
tell me that Jehovah Jireh,
I'd rather believe.
our provider, is that ignorant, forgive me God, that he has not made provision to feed the multitude of it. And guess what? He needs to stress it more. That population control is giving armory to the rich to do what Pharaoh and Herod did. So children born more of the poorer class are less likely to live.
Yes.
And I stand to tell us today, and that's why I want to pray for shortly, that our lives to those in high places is just to stick sticks.
It's true. Statistics.
And when they get to a certain stage with you,
Stop it now.
what they send you home for home, what they call it?
Palliative care.
When they give up on you and send you home,
Palliative care.
palliative care. There's more people being given palliative care.
Yeah.
Watch, brethren. You go to work, before you get paid a penny, the tax is taken out for who? NI. It's called the National Insurance is deducted. And yet, when they take out the tax into your pension, they move the goalposts and they'll move it again because they'd rather you die than to collect.
Yes.
So in the days of Pharaoh, children born for the Hebrews were a problem. In the days of Herod, it's a problem.
And now.
Now let me tell you what the problem is. Those who go beyond 3 score, up to 3 score years and 10, they say that the elderly people are living too long. So what are you going to do about it? We're going to call them.
Code.
And you call them legally.
Yes. Legalize.
You bring them into the hospital
Give them a bit of morphine.
and they die in the hospital without due care that they've worked for. And you legalize